looking at the next breakthrough for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Introducing Super Scope 6. It comes with 6 great games, and it's yours for under $60, all of which gets you into the game. Like never before. Super Scope 6, only for Super Nintendo. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
The Super Scope, sold as the Nintendo Scope in Europe and Australia, is a first-party light gun peripheral for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This light gun is the successor to the NES Zapper. The Super Scope was released in North America and the PAL regions in 1992. It was followed by a limited release in Japan in 1993 due to a lack of consumer demand. The Super Scope itself was simply explained as the Super Nintendo equivalent to the Zapper, and this is partially a true story given that the Zapper was an iconic part of the NES experience. It was seen as an inevitable conclusion that a super version of some sort was going to be released. However, whereas the Zapper was an oversized handgun, the Super Scope went even bigger by modeling it after a bazooka. Taking a look at the box, you can get some idea of the scale of how big this thing actually is. I have no problem storing the NES Zapper with my other controllers in a drawer, but this thing kind of needs its own space. The peripheral itself consists of 2 devices. First is the wireless light gun, called the transmitter, and a receiver that connects to the second controller port of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The transmitter has 2 action buttons, a pause button, and a power switch. The gun itself requires 6 AA batteries, which was a standard at the time. The transmitter is a bazooka-shaped device, just under 2 feet long. This thing is actually quite huge when you hold it in person. Located about midway on the top of the barrel are 2 buttons. First is the purple fire button, and then the gray pause button. And there is a switch used to turn the Super Scope off or select regular or turbo fire. In the middle, on either side, are 2 clips for attaching the sight. On the far end of the gun, on the bottom, there is a 6-inch grip, along with another button labeled cursor. On the front of the gun is an infrared transmitter lens, approximately 1 inch in diameter. This picks up light from the TV. Despite having its own receiver, it still requires the use of a CRT television to operate. Most of the games that are compatible with the Super Scope were produced by Nintendo themselves. Some of the most notable were Battle Clash, Tin Star, T2 the arcade game, as well as the bundled Super Scope 6 cartridge. Let's go ahead and get started with the Super Scope 6 cartridge. This game technically has only 2 games on it. However, each game has 3 different variations, so I guess technically that gives it 6 games. Each game starts up with a little calibration screen, and you'll want to make sure that you pinpoint this with the sight every time or else you'll be off every time you shoot. I assume the reasoning for having a calibration screen is because it has to sync the sensor with the TV screen, because it uses both to track where you shoot on the screen. The first game is called Blastrous. And this is a twist on Tetris where you have to use the Super Scope to shoot away pieces that might make your stack a bit too high before completing a row to make it disappear, as in regular Tetris. Overall, this game is okay, but I'm not really a big fan of the gameplay on this one.
Interesting.
The next game is called Laser Blaster, and I'm just going to try the first game here, which is Intercept. In this game, you must shoot down enemy missiles before they strike the left-hand side of the screen. The game starts out easy enough, but will add more missiles and differing speeds the longer you play it. I feel that this game is much better than Blasterous, mainly because it actually feels like a game that you would need to use a blaster for. For some reason, I never thought of using a light gun to play Tetris. So this one is okay in my book. Battle Clash is a mecha-themed light gun shooting game developed by Nintendo's R&D 1 as well as Intelligent Systems, known for their Paper Mario series as well as Fire Emblem. The story of this game takes place in the distant future, and I noticed that only because I've played it recently, the plot of this game is very similar to Tolero Boxer on the Virtual Boy. Anyway, in this game, the player is the gunner of the ST Falcon, who fights against a group of other STs in one-to-one battles. To attack, the player must shoot using the Super Scope. It is possible to shoot rapid shots by holding down the fire button, as well as energy bolts or charge shots. Energy bolts can be shot when an energy bar fills up. This happens when the player does not fire. When the energy bar has filled up, the energy bolt can be fired, though it will consume the entire energy bar. It is also important to defend against enemy attacks by shooting down their attacks. Some attacks can only be deflected by firing energy bolts. After playing through a couple stages, the gameplay gets repetitive very quickly, and it didn't really hold my interest. Overall, this is an okay game to get, but I wouldn't say it's a major selling point of the Super Scope. Yoshi's Safari was released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo. This game takes advantage of the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 capability, which allows backgrounds to be transformed by rotating or stretching it. Notably, this is the first Mario game released in the Western countries to refer to Princess Toadstool by her original Japanese name, Peach. However, because the Super Scope didn't sell very well, this game was not really a big success, and thus they were not able to get the name Peach to stick in the Western market yet. It would take a much more successful game, Super Mario 64, before gamers in the West were introduced to the name Peach. In this game, Mario and Yoshi have to save King Fret and his son Prince Pine of Jewelry Land, again from Bowser and his Koopalings. This game is a rail shooter, with the player having the perspective of Mario riding on Yoshi's back. Yoshi's head is always visible, and accidentally shooting him causes him to lose health, as well as turn back to the player to give a dirty look. Other than shooting, there are times where you actually have to platform as well. Sometimes you have to jump to avoid some obstacle on the ground, and there are branching paths that lead to different enemies, mini-bosses, or prizes. However, each level ends on the same main road, which leads to a boss. The bosses can be Koopalings, with some of them piling mechs, bigger versions of normal enemies, such as the Magikoopa and the Big Boo. Overall, I feel this is the best game for the Super Scope because it actually feels like I'm playing an arcade light shooter. Metal Combat Falcon's Revenge is the sequel to Battle Clash. The gameplay is very similar to its predecessor, but I thought I'd feature a little bit of the gameplay on here just to show you what it's like.
Nintendo presents.
I did want to point out the very extensive tutorial that you have to take at the beginning of the game. Although it's very welcome, it takes a while to get to, and I spent the majority of my time playing this game only going through the tutorial. However, once you get through the tutorial, it's still the same repetitive gameplay that you had in the first game, and I didn't really feel that this game was worth the money. Next we'll have a look at Tin Star. This was released in 1994, and only in North America. This is also one of the few games that was released by a third-party developer. This game is designed as a rail shooter, so there's not really too much to say about the gameplay, other than if you enjoy that type of game, you'll find this game kind of fun. The one critique I have of this game is that you have to use the Super Scope to fire on it. I think in a Western-themed game, you would rather be shooting a pistol than a bazooka. Last but not least, we'll look at Terminator 2, the arcade game. Again, this is one of the only other games produced by a third-party developer, albeit it is LJN. Yeah, I saw the movie. I will say if you're a fan of the Terminator franchise, and if you've played the arcade game, this will be a wonderfully nostalgic trip back in time for you. I also feel that although you do have to use a bazooka to fire a gun, it actually fits into the aesthetic of the game, as you will probably have to shoot more powerful weapons at a Terminator. Overall, I feel this game is just okay. So what are my thoughts on the Super Nintendo Super Scope? Well, compared to the NES Zapper, the Super Scope is very complex and is just really huge, measuring almost 2 feet in length. One of my complaints about it is that you do have to have 6 AA batteries on hand to power the scope. I like the fact that there's no wire connecting it to the Super Nintendo, but on the other hand, I feel that the need for such a large volume of batteries is something of a pain to deal with, especially today. And if you were to have 2-player action, that means you'd be able to reach where the trigger is and rest on your shoulder properly, and this thing was marketed towards kids. Another downside that's not exclusive to this one, but also to all light gun peripherals, is the fact that you have to have a CRT television for this to work properly. And I think that due to its size, due to the fact that it needs a CRT television that's also bulky, I don't think this is an item that many people would want to collect. Now on the other hand, there are games that exclusively use this, so do the games make it worth it? Well, I'm going to tend to say no. The only game that I really enjoyed playing was Yoshi's Safari. Terminator 2 came in at a close second, but this was also available on other platforms, so if you can find it for a platform that uses a gun rather than the Super Scope, I would say get it for that. Another comment I would make when you're playing light gun games, especially this one, the way that you have to hold it actually makes your arms get tired a lot more quickly than just using a regular light gun. And that's something that doesn't really come off in the gameplay videos, because unless you're actually holding the Super Scope for that long, even though it's not that heavy, over time, keeping your arms in the right position to fire it makes your arms get tired very quickly, and you're not likely to play these games all the way through in one sitting. So even though the Super Scope was never a really big success from Nintendo, it actually was resurrected a few times. One notable appearance was in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, where it was available as a pickup weapon. The gun was also featured in the Hollywood flop Super Mario Bros., albeit it had a different name, the Devo gun, with a different color scheme. So in the end, I would recommend this only to hardcore collectors and only if you have the space. Again, this is something I don't feel like I'll pick up very often to play, or even show off, unless people really specifically request it. Well, that's about going to wrap it up for this video. Remember, if you like what you see, please go ahead and click on this subscribe button. And if you want to see some of the videos I've already done, go ahead and click on one of the suggestions that are currently showing up on your screen. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I'll see you guys next time.